Today I'm talking about the Git Config command and how that helps us with our Git repos and being more productive. So in your root user folder, so /user/your username, it's the same on Mac and Windows. Inside of there's going to be a file called Git Config. If I do a cat.gitconfig to look at the contents of that, not git ignore, but git config, there we go. This is right now the contents of that text file. And these are different settings that we've got. So I've got user.email, user.name, and I can edit those using the Git Config command. So these are the global level ones. When you create a Git repo, you're also creating a config file inside of the .git folder that you get for your project. So if I were to right here, let's say I'm going to create a folder called Tempe. So I'll make directory Tempe. And I'm going to go inside of that folder, and we're going to use our git init command to turn it into a Git repo. Now it has created this folder called .git, and inside of that, if we go in there, we will find a file called config, and that's going to have settings for this repo. So we can do cat config. There we go. So these settings are local to this project. And the ones up in Git Config, those are global settings for all of my projects on this computer for my user account. All right, so let's clear this up. We'll go back up a level and then back up to that root level. So I'm not inside that project folder anymore. Back in my user folder. Now the Git Config command, we can say git config, and if I want to find out the value of a setting, let's say user.name, I just say git config username. Because I'm not inside of a project, it goes to the global setting. If I were inside of a project, it's going to assume that I'm talking about local. It's going to look inside of there. If it doesn't see it, then it will go up to that global setting and check there for me. So there's actually about 5 different levels of settings that you've got. There's a system-wide settings. You can have environmental level variables for Git. There's the global ones that come from this file. There's the local ones in your project. There's work tree and there's file, 2 other levels, but the local and the global, those are the 2 that you're going to be working with the most. So think of global as the ones that apply to all your projects, and the local ones are within your project itself. Now, this will write out the value. If I want to see everything, git config, I can specify that I want to talk about global, but because I'm not in a project, that's what it'll go to. It'll go to the global ones. And it lists off basically everything that was inside of that git config file. Same thing as if I did cat.gitconfig, like that. So it's the same contents. So if I want to get rid of one of these settings, let's say user.name or user.email, we could do git config -- global will be specific that we want to do at the global level, and unset is the flag that we want, and we're going to get rid of user. Let's say name. There we go. Now that is gone. If I do the listing again, doesn't matter which way I do it, you'll see that user.name is gone. I've only got that email setting left in there. So I want to add a setting in, for example, user.name. We can say git config. We're going to talk about global. And then we provide the setting that we want and its value. So user.name, and I can't seem to spell today. The value we're going to pass in. There we go. That now has added user.name just inside of here. So if we list them again, now we have user.name. Great, so that works. So git config, we can set global properties, user.name, user.email. There are a lot more settings. Actually here, the Git Config Documentation is a very long page with a lot of settings on it. So I'll leave a link to that down inside the description for you, so you can refer to that later on if you want. There's a ton of things that you can do with Git Config, but this is some of the more common stuff. Setting a username, setting an email for your account, We can also do things like adding a remote repository. So when you want to set the remote, that gets saved inside that config file that is part of your local project. Another very useful thing that you can do here is create aliases for the Git commands. So if I say Git Config, and I want to do this globally, so it applies to all my repos, I can create something called an alias dot, and then I'm providing a keyboard shortcut for a common Git command. Let's say status. I'm going to create a shortcut for the status command. Whenever I type git status, it gives me the status of my current repo, but here I'm saying that the letter S is going to be my keyboard shortcut. So let's go back into that temp folder that we created. Now I'm inside of that folder, which is a Git project. There's the Git command. If I do git S, there we go. That is now the status command. I have set this up so that the letter S is equivalent to status. If I wanted to create a shortcut for add, I could set it to A. If I wanted to create a shortcut for checkout, I could do CO or branch, BR. Whatever the keyboard shortcut is that I want to use, I can set it inside of here. So git config, and we're in a project now, so I've got to be sure to add this to global. If I want to use it on other projects, let's say CM is going to be my shortcut for commit. I'll do one. A is going to be my shortcut for add. We'll do CO for checkout. I'll do BR for branch. So I can set as many of these as I want. Now inside of here, let's say I create a file called index.html. That's in my repo. We'll look inside of here. Yep, I've got an index.html file inside my project. I'm going to add that to my repo. If I do git status, okay, there's one untracked file, so I'm going to add that. Git add, and I'll say dot for the current folder. We can do -A for everything. It's only the one file. There we go. If I do git status again, there we go. It's untracked. We can do a git commit now. I did CM was my alias up here. If I scroll back, there it is. CM is commit. -M added index.html. There we go. So these shortcuts are now working. So that gives us a git config global alias dot the keyboard shortcut. All right, so that should be enough to get you started. We've got the setting the username and the password. We've got creating shortcuts with alias. And just as a demonstration very quickly at the end here, if I add a repo, so we'll say git remote add, we'll call it origin, and I'll just grab this empty repo that I've got right here. There we go. I'm adding that. Now, if I go into my Git folder and I display the contents of my config file, we can see there is the URL that I just set with git remote add origin. It went into that settings file. So if we say git config -L to list off everything, we get, here's the aliases that we set, here's the username and email that we set as at the global level as well, and here's the stuff for my local project with the remote origin URL, remote origin fetch. All right, so I hope that helps you out. If you have any questions about Git config, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.